Hey there, macro folks. This is Mr. Hooker, and today we are going to talk about inflation, disinflation, and deflation. So let's just start right here on this title screen talking about what these three words mean. So inflation is a general increase in prices, an increase in the general level of prices. Deflation, let's skip over to deflation. It is a decrease in the general level of prices. Disinflation. Now, that is something you want, ladies and gentlemen. That is a decrease in the inflation rate. So you still have inflation, but you got less inflation than you used to have. That is what all that means. So, so what causes 500 billion% inflation in Zimbabwe 2008? That was the worst ever inflation in Germany, 1922. I didn't think theirs was as bad. So why did inflation spiral out of control in Armenia, 27,000%, Nicaragua, 60,000%? So what caused all these problems? And right now you have, I'm trying to think of what country it was, Argentina, I believe. Um, they can't get anybody to print their money, so they had to print. Might be Colombia. It's either Argentina or Colombia. This was in your Monday Morning Economist. If you're looking at those and the links, but they had to pay a Russian money printer, the folks that print the Russian currency, they had to pay them a premium to print their currency because their currency is rapidly devalued. And so they had to print just a small batch. According to the article, they printed a much smaller batch than you would normally print because they couldn't afford to print a normal batch because of the extremely high fee that the Russian currency printer was charging them. But they couldn't go to their normal printer or even their backup printer because they owe both of them for previous runs and they won't print money for them anymore. So that's kind of how that is. So basically, they can't get money printed through normal channels because they owe people money. The Russian printer was willing to do it, but they charged them a high fee and required their fee up front. So it's basically like having the mob print your money for you. Crazy, crazy story. Um, Classical model of money and prices. So basically, high inflation is always associated with rapid increases in the money supply. Um, so basically, hyperinflation is anything over 50% a year. Um, so yeah, it's not good. So previously, we learned in the long run, an increase in the money supply leads to an equal percentage rise in the overall price level. So classical model of the price level and real quantity of money. Um, Basically is always at its long run equilibrium level. So real quantity of money is equal to money supply divided by the price level, where M is the nominal money supply and P is the price level. So people get a little crazy with this. So in general, inflation and money supply move together, especially during periods of high inflation. So the blues are monetary base and reds are consumer prices. Um, and this was money growth and inflation in Venezuela. So 2016, everything was good. 17, 2018, things got a little nuts. 2019, it went back a little bit. Um, so, what's to prevent a government from paying for its expenses by printing money? Absolutely not a thing. So, the Treasury issues debt. The Fed monetizes it by buying it back from the public through open market purchases of T bills. The U.S. government can and does raise revenue by printing money. So, seigniorage is the revenue generated by a government's right to print money, usually less than 1% of the U.S.'s government budget. So, we don't print much. By printing money, a government increases the money supply, which triggers inflation, and that erodes purchasing power of money. So we have fiat money, which most countries do. And one of the things with that is it's only good because you have faith in the government. So the inflation tax is the reduction in the real value of money held by the public caused by inflation. So, if you didn't have faith in it, that's the problem. That would be it. So governments that run large deficits can reduce the deficit by raising taxes, reduce the deficit by reducing spending, finance the deficit by printing money, or A, B, and C are all correct. So let's go with that one. There you go. All right. Seigniorage is the change in money, where change is the monthly change, and M is the money supply. It's more useful to look at it at real seigniorage, which is the revenue change, the revenue created by printing money divided by the real price by the price level, and that's the change in money divided by price. This can be rewritten to real seigniorage is equal to change in money divided by money times money divided by price, or rate of growth of the money supply times the real money supply. So, in the face of high inflation, the public just reduces the real amount of money it holds. So, M divided by P gets smaller, and the government responds by accelerating the rate of growth of the money supply. And so, this leads to an even higher rate of inflation, and people respond by reducing their real money holdings even more. So that's just a self-reinforcing process, and it could get out of control depending on how crazy things get for you. So the hyperinflation in Zimbabwe, that hyperinflation got so bad that this was a sign that was found in a South African toilet. Um, it made the rounds for a while. This sign made the rounds for a while. I don't know which part of this sign stresses me the most or surprises me the most, the fact that people were using Zim dollars as toilet paper, or the fact that people were using cardboard as paper. Because cardboard can get pretty rough. So that's that's also distressing to me. So moderate inflation and disinflation. Um, in the US, the inflation rate peaked at 14% in the beginning of the 80s. In Britain, inflation rate reached 26% in 75. So why did this happen? How did it happen? On our end, we had a corrupt president and a cocky chairman of the Fed. So, cocky and probably a little bit, you know, useless. I don't know how you want to put that. So in the short run, policies that produce a booming economy led to higher inflation, and policies that reduce inflation tend to depress the economy. So um, that creates problems for governments. Inflationary policies produce short term political gains, and policies to bring inflation down carry short term political costs. And that's what caused the problems here in the US. We had a very strong willed president. So, this was for us here in the US. In the 70s, we had Nixon. Early 70s, we had Nixon. And then, mid to late 70s, we had Carter. Not a very strong willed president, but Nixon literally strong armed the chairman of the Fed to allow him to do what he wanted to do. And that led to some problems for the way things were going. And it caused some problems. It caused some problems for him. He was trying to do what he needed to do to win, got caught with war. It ended up getting caught up in Watergate eventually. But um, the things he was doing for the economy were really short term things that in the long run were going to crash the economy. In his world, in his mind, he figured by the time this crashes the economy, I'll be out of office. I won't care. Um, that'll be somebody else's problem. And it did. It crashed the economy during Carter's term, and that led us to Reagan, and then that led us to what happened for those 8 years, um, which is what it is now. So that's kind of what that is. All right. So the output gap, unemployment rate, aggregate output fluctuates around potential output in the short run. When it falls short of potential output, we get a recessionary gap. If it exceeds it, we have an inflationary gap. So that output gap is the percentage difference between actual level of real GDP and the potential output. So when actual aggregate output is equal to potential output, the actual unemployment rate is equal to the natural rate of unemployment, the NRU. So when output gap is positive, we have an inflationary gap. The unemployment rate is below the NRU. And if the output gap is negative, we have a recessionary gap. The unemployment rate is above the natural rate. Um, so fluctuations of aggregate output around the long run potential output correspond to fluctuations of employment around the natural rate. And that's as it should be. This is what it looks like. The red line is the actual unemployment rate. The blue line is the natural rate of unemployment. The red line on the bottom one is the output gap. Um, the blue heartbeat looking line is the cyclical unemployment. And then you've got that whole zero unemployment kind of thing. So that's the way that actually looks. All right. Positive output gap implies an unemployment rate, and that should be, if it's positive, we should be below the natural rate. All right. Okun's Law. Yay. Cyclical unemployment seems to move less than the output gap. So in 82, the output gap reached negative 8%, but cyclical unemployment reached only 4%. So Arthur Okun, JFK's chief economic advisor, discovered that idea. So Okun's law said there's a predictable negative relationship between the output gap and the unemployment rate. So modern estimates see that a rise in the output gap of 1% reduces the unemployment rate by about 0.5%. So half the difference in the output gap. So if the natural rate of unemployment is 5.2% and the economy is producing at 98% of potential output, the output gap is -2. Then Okun's law predicts an unemployment rate of 5.2 minus half times -2, which is 6.2. So cyclical unemployment and the output gap, they both, learn about this is the question. Cyclical unemployment and the output gap move together. The cyclical unemployment fluctuates more, have a relationship that Okun's law quantifies, are negatively related. In the US, when the output gap rises by 1%, cyclical unemployment rises, rate decreases by 0.5. Or A, B, and C are all correct. They are all the same. They are all right. All right, short run Phillips curve. In 58, AWH Phillips found that for Britain, when the unemployment rate was high, the wage rate tended to fall. When the unemployment rate was low, the wage rate tended to rise. So that gave us a short run Phillips curve, the negative short run relationship between unemployment rate and inflation rate. So this is only ever really held in the short run. In the long run, it disappears. So when the unemployment rate's low, inflation's high. And when the unemployment rate's high, inflation is low. So basically, we get a line that looks like that. And that's what it'll look like. Relationship between unemployment and inflation. All right, we're going to stop right there and we will pick it up right here in the next video.